Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst for 10th February 2025, where we'll be discussing 7 most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. In the first section of analysis, we'll be discussing India and the imperatives for India's developments in the research fields of the country. And we'll be also discussing about the various initiatives taken by the government and also the various issues and way forward in this regard. In the next one, we'll be looking into the recent outcomes of the budget 2025-26 on the railway sector of our country and also the issues and way forward. In the next part, in the simplified one, we'll be looking into 5 more important articles from a prelims perspective, because we know that the prelims 2025 examination is upcoming soon, and that is why we need to be well revised ahead of the examination. So stay tuned. Hello students, I hope you all are doing well, and I hope your prelims 2025 examination preparation is on track. And with this, we'll be starting the very first article, which is from the Hindu, which is an editorial focusing on India's research and development sector. In this one, we'll be also looking into the various issues along with the various relevant data and also the government initiatives and the way forward for the research and development sector. It is highly important from prelims perspective that we focus on the various aims and objectives of the sector pertaining to new government initiatives and also the various social implications of the sector from a prelims perspective. Also, when we talk about GS2 mains, we have the management of social sector services pertaining to education, and also in our GS3 we have various aspects of science and tech, and also here the new initiatives and the new government schemes are highly important for the mains examination too. So with this, we'll be starting with the very basics of what is R&D and why it matters for any country. Now, the second part of the question can be answered with reference to the noted Paul Romer, who is a Nobel Prize winner in economics, and its studies on the impact of R&D on the country's GDP or gross domestic product. Now, he conducted a survey and he conducted a research instead where he focused on one country, for example. For example, let us consider this is India, and in India, at one point of time, at one point of a year, we have, for example, 100 rupees as our GDP. Now, Paul Romer told that for any country, at least some percentage of it must be contributed by the research and development. For example, say, if I can take the real output of manufacturing sector, services sector, and agricultural sector, for example, we can get around, say, 60-70 rupees of our GDP. And the rest 30-40 rupees of our GDP is actually coming from the advancements we are doing in science and technology, from the new inventions we are creating, and the various discoveries that is taking place in the science and tech arena. So that is why it refers to a systematic investigation and experiment to create new technologies, products or processes. Now, this is extremely important for any country because of the key players involved in this sector. Firstly, we have to understand, we have seen so many Hollywood movies, for example, Spider-Man, for example, say the Interstellar, and so many other movies where we have seen that the private companies conduct heavy research in various sectors. For example, in the movie Rise of the Planet of Apes, we have seen how various pharmaceutical companies conduct various research experiments on the chimpanzees and the apes which are related to human beings to develop medicines. For example, in various other sectors, we have say the research and development with reference to say the renewable sectors of our country and so many other sections. So it is the private sector who will be doing research and development and improve their technologies, their products over a period of time to get a better amount of profitability. So the second one is also about the universities and the various research institutes in the country. So they also conduct various research, but these are generally what we mean by as basic research. Basic and applied research are also which are done by them, by the universities and the institutes mostly. Basic research means that they do not have much of an commercial interest, not too much of an profit motive. Applied research generally means that we apply some theories in our daily applications in our daily spheres of our lives. So these are also the two types of research. Apart from this, we have the commercial research, which is attributed to the business sector. Also, some of the universities such as IITs and so on, they also conduct their own kind of commercial research also in collaboration with the private sector. So that is also one of the sources of revenues for IITs, IIMs and so on. Also, when we talk about the government agencies, they conduct mainly developmental research, basic research, applied research, and also the main agenda of the government agencies is to run the government funded research institutions. Now, when we talk about India, we have a problem, and the problem is very severe. When we talk about the total number of funds in rupee terms that we spend for the research and development sector, that comes up to be only around 0.64% of our GDP figures, that is as of 2020. And here, when we compare this with China, we have seen that China is much more ahead at 2.4%, USA is further ahead with 3.4%, and also South Korea is at 4.8% of their GDP. So they are spending more than double, triple, right, 4 times, 5 times that the amount that we spend on our, say, science and tech. In addition, when we also talk about the research productivity and innovation metrics, which are very important data for our mains examination, that is the data from 2021-22. So this says that while the number of PhDs that India produces annually is quite high, and also the rank internationally is quite high, but when we talk about the researchers per million, publication output, also the top cited articles and the patents granted in India, we find that India is far behind than US, UK, China, Korea and Japan. And this is a very concerning trend, because also when we talk about the number of researchers per million inhabitants of the country, we find that the UK is around having 4,400. Right, we have the, say, US, China all ahead of India, right? And also they are not ahead by double the margin. They are ahead 4 times, 5 times, even 10 times the margin, more than the 10 times. So that is what we have to understand. India has a problem when it comes to the research sector, and that is why in budget 2025-26, India actually announced a 3x boost when it concerns the allocation to the science and tech ministry. So the amount has been tripled when this amount is flowing to the Department of Science and Tech, Biotechnology, Scientific and Industrial Research. So we can see the amount of research money, or say the money allocated for research, has doubled. And also we need to discuss some of the important components too. Around 20,000 crore has been dedicated for the, say, development of small and modular reactors. Now these are nuclear reactors, nuclear fission reactors at a much more smaller scale, hence their name, small. That means that they actually occupy a fraction of the size of a normal size nuclear fission reactor. Also there's a modular, because it is extremely easy for us to assemble them, just like we assemble Lego blocks, right? So it is designed in such a way, manufactured in such a way that the blocks of, say, the nuclear reactors here, they can be easily transported, they can be easily be assembled, and they can be easily be started. The operations can be easily be started here. Also, this generates nuclear fission, which is an efficient way of transitioning our economy to a greener and cleaner economy. That is also one of our Panchamrit aims, to transform India to a net zero carbon emitter by 2070. And that is why nuclear energy is a very important component, where we have a target of building 5 small modular reactors by 2033 to enhance India's clean energy capacity, because of the various advantages we can see here. Firstly, they can be suited in any locations which are not suitable for normal reactors. For example, say we have locations such as seismically prone areas where we cannot build nuclear reactors. Also, below the, near the coasts which are tsunami prone. So generally we can understand that the nuclear reactors, the normal reactors, they are very sensitive to natural events. So these are having a slight advantage in this particular matter. Also, they are free fabricated units, and these can be easily manufactured, especially with the advent of 3D manufacturing nowadays, right, which is bringing manufacturing of big scale articles big scale items to small scale and a much more efficient manner, right? And also we can understand this can be easily be deployed in areas of our country which are having high demand of electricity. Especially we can understand during the heat waves of 2023-24, we have seen that the peak power demand in the northern India has bridged like anything. So we can have some areas of India where we can have the small modular reactors, and that is why the amount that is spent here will be going to the research and development aspect. In addition to this, the Prime Minister's Fellowship Scheme is offering 10,000 scholarships, right, over the next 5 years to the research, to development of research of IITs and IISc. Also, it has increased the research funding as we have seen here. Also, there is a research development and innovation fund. Mainly the objective is to encourage startups, because we know startups can conduct a good amount of private research, which is lacking in the country. And also when it pertains to the various sunrise industries which are having high potential going 5 years, 10 years from now on, right, which are emerging industries. Even we have the food processing industry, right? So we should be having better amount of R&D, due to which this fund under Department of Science and Technology can prove immensely beneficial. Also, when we talk about the other benefits, the financial supports to the private companies, here is paramount, because India over a period of time is encouraging the private sector to increase the research funds in the country. And finally, it will be increasing the private participation in the sector here. And here, this brings me to discussing the challenges of India's R&D ecosystem. The very first challenge, as I have been telling you, right, because of the various developments that the government now is taking to stimulate the private sector, the very first challenge lies in that one. Because when we talk about India's comparison again with countries such as South Korea, Japan, Italy, and all of the countries as you can see here. Also, this is given in the handout for your reference. We see that in India, government spends around 50% of the research and development, with institutions such as ISRO, DRDO, right, CSIR, ICAR, which is pertaining to the agricultural research in the country. They are dedicated around more than 50% of the research in the country. That is, it is fueled by the government of India. Now, this is not good for the country, because governments simply sometimes do not have huge amount of funds. And we have to understand with this level also, it is spending only 0.6% of our GDP. So already we understand the amount is low. Then the private sector is not investing. So we have a systemic issue here. Second, we have to understand where that systemic issue lies in. It lies in our weaker infrastructure and also innovation ecosystem when we compare with the rest of the world. Firstly, when we talk of the example of maybe developing the semiconductor industry in the country, do we have advanced fabrication units? Do we have proper amount of research institutions pertaining to the development of semiconductors and also the development of supply chain surrounding the semiconductors in the country? No, we do not have. Also, India is right now waking up to this reality and attracting various talents and also the private sector investments such as Tata and even FDI from Taiwan in the country in these matters. Also, when it concerns our research universities, the infrastructure is not proper. There are huge number of absentees when it concerns the teachers, the lecturers, and also when it concerns the basic facilities of labs, laboratory equipments. So that is lacking. Also, when it concerns the skilling impact, the skill is lacking in the country because of the high scale of brain drain in the country. I'll be showing you a figure in the very last article as to what is the amount of brain drain. But we have to understand, since independence, the brightest and brightest of our minds have left the country, and they are spearheading the research and development of the other developed countries. In the comment section, you can let me know 2-3 names in recent times who are Nobel Prize winners but are not Indian citizens. Also, when we talk about, say, the clarity that the private access needs when it concerns these funds, for example, the small modular reactor funds, the funds regarding the research development and innovation fund. So there is not a particular clarity and as to what should be the timeline of the funds should be, or what should be the eligibility of startups and industries, and also what would happen if they say the fund is partially assisted by the private companies also. Apart from this, we also have a lack of inclusivity. There have been many allegations in the newspaper articles. On a daily basis, you can find there are some articles blaming the caste discrimination of a particular university, or they are blaming the low participation of women in the STEM resources. So these are the inclusivity issues that our research ecosystem has. And finally, when it is actually the time to translate research into potential technologies India is lacking behind. It is seen from this particular figure, right? While we have so many publications, we have so many PhDs in the country, the patents which are generated are only at around 30,490. This is the data from 2021-22. So we understand the scope of research in India is immense. But the translation of those particular research into output is actually what is lacking right now. So that is why this article is giving us some solutions and recommendations. Apart from this, there are some more solutions which I felt need to be done in our country. Firstly, we need to increase our funding to at least 2% of GDP in R&D by 2030. This is imperative. Increase the funding. Second, we have to increase the infrastructural needs of our research institution. Be it better labs, be it better scaling, be it better, aspects of our, infrastructure at our schools and colleges. It should be starting from now. We should be having the proper infrastructure in schools itself by partnering with industry, institutions, universities, and so on. We need to also increase our public-private partnerships in the country, where we have to focus on the research and development aspect. In this one, we can also collaborate with the international MNCs to boost R&D in the country, and in this aspect, Microsoft, Meta, Google, and even Apple recently have signed various, agreements with the government of India to boost digital literacy skills and also to boost the participation of women in R&D and so on. We also can give tax benefits and incentives to the private sector who will be conducting research. For example, imagine a startup is establishing an R&D division in the company. So we can tell that, okay, if you hire 5 more scientists, if you publish 10 more research papers in this year, if you take around 5 more patents, I'll be giving you a 10% tax rebate or various other incentives. If you want to open a branch in other cities, I'll be assisting with the land acquisition and those related issues. So these are the incentives that we can offer. Also, when it concerns the skill development and workforce training, it is highly important, because mainly we have seen in our colleges, at our bachelor's, master's, and even as the post-master's level, we find that the skills and the various equipments with our professors are not enough. So sometimes there are generational gaps in learning various new technologies. So be it that we have to improve this. Also, we need a clear implementation roadmap of the various initiatives. I will be discussing some of the one. Also, we have here the Vigyan Dhara scheme, which India recently launched. So we need a clear roadmap for all those government schemes to be implemented. Also, we need to improve the foundational infrastructure, the logistics sector, so the various important sector of our country, to actually help attract the FDI in the country, and also various investments in the country by the private sector too. Because unless and until we have the basic infrastructure correct, we will not be having boost in this matter. And finally, we have to realize the aims and objectives of the national education policy in this regard, and that is why we have so many initiatives to promote R&D. The first one we have seen here, the Vigyan Dhara initiative, which is trying to promote the science and tech capacity in the country, and it is trying to build a collaborative research ecosystem in the country through international cooperation. And the same kind of initiative is also seen in so many other initiatives here. When we talk about Uchchatar Avishkar Yojana, it is about building manufacturing, research and development in the country. We have already discussed about semiconductors. We need to talk about automobiles, about EVs, about so many other sectors where we can create huge manufacturing output. Also, when it comes to the imprint initiative, this is actually the new project proposals that is having a fund of around 112 crores announced by the government of India to promote research in so many areas such as ICT, advanced materials, healthcare technology, and so on. Apart from this, we also have the Anushandhan National Research Foundation, which is a transformational step toward transforming the research and developmental scene in the country. It is having an estimated budget of 50,000 crores for 5 years, and it will be setting up an institution to provide high amount of guidance for research, innovation, and entrepreneurship in the country. We also have the Spark scheme, which is trying to collaborate with various UK, with the US and various other international universities, and exchange the scientific pool and also develop the skill of our country here. We also have the Adult Tinkering Labs, which is a comprehensive ecosystem to promote research, development, entrepreneurship, starting from the schools itself and also involving the private sector here. Also, we have various research parks at IIT, such as here we can see the research park at IIT Madras, right? And here this is a particular aspect where various private sector can come up and also to boost the sector. And finally, we have the One Nation, One subscription, which is providing easy access to scientific journals across universities with the help of one subscription. So these are the various things that we needed to discuss. I want answers from all of you pertaining to 2015 and 19 PYQs. So to let me see how your prelims preparation is going on. And finally, for your mains practice, there is a question as usual. You let me know, right, what is your approach in the comments below. In the next budget, we are going to see what does the budget offer the Indian Railways. And this is the budget we are talking about, that is 2025-26. This is a very important article from our prelims when we talk about the economic and social development, where we have the railways, Indian Railways, and the various schemes and objectives under the same. Also, when we talk about the GS3 infrastructure, it is straight away written that railways and and the various issues related to infrastructure is important for the examination. In this article, we are going to look at the very basic overview of Indian Railways, most important issues highlighted here, and what can be done as solutions as proposed by various committees. To start with, we understand that the Indian Railways is perhaps one of the most important things, right, that British left behind as a colonial legacy for the country. When British left, it had already left India with a expansive amount of railway networks in the country, while it is to be understood and to be noted that British developed the railways for its own interest, for its own concerns, and in its development we have also seen how British severely impoverished the various sections of the country, be it say the transportation of the military personnel across the country to be deployed against any nationalist movement, or be it the development of railway or taking place at the cost of environment, because the railway development and the laying of Indian the Indian railway tracks led to the deforestation of lakhs and lakhs of trees in the country. So this is where we have to understand railways is a colonial legacy with its own pros and cons. And here we also have the first train between Mumbai and Thane in 1853, right? Can you let me know in the comments where the second train ran from and in which year? We all remember the first. We need to be aware of the second one too. Also, when it pertains to the various data which is important for our examination, we need to be aware that railway transports around 3 million tons of freight per day, right? It is also the 8th largest formal employer in the entire world according to Economic Survey. If we increase 1 rupee in railway output or railway revenue, for example, it increases Indian GDP by 3.3 rupees. So it is having a multiplier effect by around 3 times, right? Also, when we talk about the potential of Indian Railways and compared to the entire world, so this is around by 2050, Indian Railways will be having 40% of total global share of rail activity globally, right? And also when it pertains to Indian government's understanding of this potential, that is why in various railway infrastructure, be it the various signaling system and so various other aspects of infrastructure, we have 100% FDI. And when we talk about the revenue, the Indian Railways earns more revenue from its freight, that is by transporting various goods, that is it is attributed to around 69%. Apart from this, the passenger is only being attributed for 24% of their total volume. When we talk about, say, the main issues in the Indian Railways, according to the budget 2025-26, which is mentioned in the article here, firstly, the first thing that the article is lamenting about, that railway budget is no longer a budget highlight. That is, since 2017, when it was discontinued and it was merged in the union budget. Now, since 2024, June-July budget, and also 2025 budget here, in this year, we have seen that there is no direct mention about the railways in the budget speech itself. Also, when we talk about the various government initiatives, the government is not ignoring the railways by not mentioning it in the budget speech. While in a later announcement, we have seen that the investment has been massive. The railway allocation has been at around 2.53, 52 lakh crore, right, where we have had Vande Bharat trains, Amrit Bharat, right, and also Namo Bharat Rapido railways, general non-AC coaches, which will be, scaled up even over a period of time. But we have to understand that over 10 years, the government has spent 13 lakh crores rupees. But when we talk about the freight traffic, which is the Indian Railways workhorse, right, it is only generating a growth of 2% per annum. Or the passenger footfalls have not yet reached the pre-COVID level. When we also talk about the operating ratio, it is in the range of 98 to 100. And this generally means the money that the railway spends or with reference to the money that the railway earns. So any ratio above 100 means that the railways is spending more than what it is earning. And also when we look at the last 10 years, 20 years data, railways operating ratio is near to 100 and sometimes even is exceeding 100. In recent time, that is why government is decreasing the allocations also. This has been seen in this particular year too. So this you can see here, the operating ratio of the railways. Also when we talk about the capital expenditure, right, you can see from 2012 to around 2020, it increased quite impressively, but after that it is kind of stagnating. Right, so this is also we have to understand. There are many positive announcements such as this, but also we have to understand, be it the railway track renewable targets or be it the review targets of the various tracks, these are not taking place on time. So there are delays, particularly when we talk about the targets here. Also when we talk about the railway system, according to latest CAG reports too, right, the railway infrastructure is aging in the country. And that is why we have so many incidents of railway accidents in recent times. Also, we have seen the recent accidents in Odisha, so which has actually claimed a lot of lives, due to which the government was doing some initiatives such as implementing the Kavach system. But again, the Kavach system and its implementation progress, or say the timeline, is being stretched over a period of time. Still now, we are yet to have 100% coverage of Kavach coverage across the entire railway grid in the country, and that makes it extremely prone for Indian Railways to be succumbing to various railway accidents in the recent times, and that is what is also important for us to note here. Apart from this, there are various other issues highlighted in this article. Firstly, about the modernization and railway development issue here. According to a very important government initiative known as the Amrit Bharat Station Scheme, this is actually a project which is trying to renovate the railway stations in the country, even when it comes to the big railway stations such as Shialdah railway station, such as New Delhi railway station, which is under innovation as of now. This will be offering amenities for people with disabilities, integrating them with stations, offering executive lounges, right, where we have targeting around 500 stations across the country with a budget of around 24,000 crores. Right, so the main thing is here that we are trying to boost the ease of living and enhance the ease of comfort also, and also special care is taken to ensure that the stations are in line with local culture, heritage, and also architecture, due to which we have seen the transformation of the Mumbai railway station, the Goa railway station into rich cultural hubs too. But apart from this, right, we are having various issues with railway, station modernization and also railway, modernization in general. For example, when we talk about a particular issue which has been highlighted here, it is actually saying that the PPP model, or the public-private partnership, when it comes to redevelopment and modernization of the Indian Railways, particularly the stations here, that is not working out. And in recent times, it has been seen that Railway Ministry has been awarding contracts under the engineering procurement construction here. So this is what we have to understand. This is the EPC model where 100%, right, close to 100% of the money is being spent by the government of India, right, or say the railways here. So this is actually a departure from the PPP model, where actually the private sector could also contribute. Hence, actually this could have led to less number of funds. But why the private sector is not participating is due to various issues, the legal issues, the delays pertaining to this sector here. Apart from this, the Indian Railways is right now advocating that Indian Railways will be soon be achieving 100% electrification, which will be transforming Indian Railways into the world's cleanest and greenest railways ever. But we have to understand that in India, as of now, 5,000 diesel locomotives are not operating because of, say, the incomplete electrification, as we can see here. The electrification progressed in 2014 to 2022-23 as of now, as we can see here. It is not increasing over a period of time. time, right? As we can see here, right, the cumulative electrification, while it has happened in most of the states, there are many states here which are still lagging behind, correct? So this is what we have to understand. Also, when we talk about the northeast section here, we can see here, they are not at all, even a quarter of what it is the target of being electrified. So this is what we have to keep in mind. That is the reality. And also, when we talk about the majority of the, say, Indian railways, if it is not being electrified, it is being run or driven through coal. And here, when we talk about the next issue, we have a lack of clarity on the future mega projects. A very prominent example is with the case of Vande Bharat, or also the bullet trains. The bullet train that will be running from Ahmedabad to Mumbai, which is facing a lot of issue due to land acquisition issues, right? Due to incomplete compensation and various other legal hurdles. The mega projects, the Vande Bharat, the rapid railways in various cities, these are all lacking behind. And so this is what we have to focus on when we talk about solving the matter. And also, when we talk about the freight transport and future viability, the status of dedicated freight corridors, which is setting up a separate corridor itself apart from the passenger corridor to transport various goods and various consignments in the cargoes to the nearby ports, airports. So this is also something which is lacking behind, and the future viability of this project is also in limbo. So that is why we have recommendations from various committees which are extremely important for your mains examination. So we will be going on through the recommendations very quickly. So firstly, we have seen from the Kakodkar committee recommendations of 2012, right? He recommended setting up a railway safety authority that will be looking into the various aspects of railway safety and also the investments that need to be done in the Indian railways to boost the safety here. Also, a non-lapsable Rashtriya Rail Sanraksha course of around 1 lakh crores over 5 years should be set up. And here, human resource development, for example, skilling, industrial training, and also international learning, programs must be done here. Where also one of the recommendation is to conduct independent accident investigations. So when we talk about railway accidents, we can actually use his recommendations here. When we talk about the Bibek-Debroy committee recommendation, the committee recommended the Indian Railways to privatize its non-core activities. Right here, the railways can actually save a lot of funds if it is dedicating its non-core to the private sector and focus on the core activities of the Indian Railways. Also, the Railway Infrastructure Authority of India was envisaged to be set up by this committee too, which will be looking at the various infrastructural needs such as electrification delays and the various other delays in the sector. Also, when we talk about the Vinod Rai committee, it focused on creating an independent railway safety authority that can be given a statutory power or statutory authority too. Also, he recommended, along with Bibek-Debroy committee, setting up a railway infrastructure company and also railway accident investigation board. The Rakesh Mohan committee of 2010, he recommended far more, better reforms when it pertains to the diversity of the reforms here. He proposed that we should be reforming our accounting system of the Indian Railways by bringing it much more closer and making it fully digitally compliant and transparent. The railways should also be diversifying its cargo sector or freight sector, right, in the FMGC, fast moving consumer goods sections, where we can actually transport various goods such as soaps, detergents, biscuits, which are used daily by the people of the country. And Indian Railways should be capitalizing on this potential because India is actually a very vast market. So very vast market means that the transportation needs of this FMGC commodities are actually quite high. Next, also when we talk about the IT sector, containerized cargo and automobile sectors, we can actually focus individually on this in the railway itself. Also, we can have long distance and intercity transport apart from the usual metros that we see. Apart from the metros, we can actually have long distance and intercity transport. Already these are done by local trains in many cities of the country. For example, Mumbai, Kolkata, where we have a good amount of development of local trains, but we have to further modernize and also electrify these local trains too. Also, we need to establish very high-speed railway corridors such as Vande Bharat, and also try to develop the complete the development of bullet train in the country as soon as possible. And finally, we should be also linking the railways with the logistics parks and also linking it better with roadways, airports, seaports, and so on. So this is what we have to keep in mind when it pertains to this article. There is a PYQ from 2015. You can let me know the answer in the comments below, and also look at this mains practice question. Read it, try to solve it, and pertaining to the railways and mainly for the infrastructural sections, we can all refer to Niti Aayog's strategy for New India at 75. So there we have so many good statements, good targets for the various infrastructural sector, where we can use this in our introductions or body, or even as a part of our conclusion too. Now we'll be moving on to the simplified articles. Recently what happened is that the Donald Trump became very angry with South Africa's land acquisition laws. While he loves meddling with other countries' affairs, but here we need to focus on this article and what pertains in India's case. So this is very important when we talk about right to property and private property here. So this is important for our Indian polity and governance. Also, for example, for GS2, we need to be aware of the various features of the Indian Constitution. At the very first place, we need to talk about what is the status of the right to property for our revision purpose for the upcoming prelims. So we knew that earlier than 44 amendment, we had the right to property as a fundamental right, where the citizens of the country had the right to purchase, possess and dispose of the property in India, where mainly the article 19(1)(f) and article 31 pertain to the strong right to property in the country. But over a period of time, government understood something, that if in India we need to develop railways or real estate or various farming infrastructure in rural areas, the government needs to procure some land, right? So government, for its public welfare purposes, which is a part of our DPSP2, we need to build a welfare state where we need to provide for the greater good of the people. So that is why in the 44th Amendment, the right to property as a fundamental right was removed, and it was inserted in Article 300A broadly as a legal and a constitutional right that no person shall be deprived of his property except by an authority of law. Now, this authority of law is extremely important in our case. This tells that if at all that the government is willing to acquire some other property, for example, that imagine that this is a highway and the government is thinking of expanding this highway from a 2-lane to a 4-lane highway. Now, imagine that your house is located here. Now, in public interest, your house should be removed and the logistics sector and the economy of the sector will be boosted if there is a 4-lane highway here. Now you will be telling that if my house is removed, then there must be a particular law for that, right? I must be getting a particular compensation for that. While I can provide to the government, no issues. You take my land, you build road. But this is something of my land, I must be getting compensation for that. So that is why, government has the authority to seize someone else's property for the benefit of the general welfare. But at the same time, right, we have to understand the government must be having proper compensation, all of the safeguards when it is trying to acquire land for public purposes, right? So this was also reflected in a major Supreme Court case in 2022, where the Supreme Court told that the government cannot seize property without following necessary legal process. Why? Because the Supreme Court told that government, you go and read the Article 300A, where you have, the responsibility to make a law and give the compensation, right? And this particular debate is also something which is not new, right? This is quite old, because according to J. Jure Belai A. Praki, right, that is on the law of war and peace, right? Here we have to understand, according to this, the Dutch scholar Hugo Grotius in 1625 told that the property of the subject is under the eminent domain of the state, so that the state or he who acts for it may use and even alienate and destroy such property. That means if the state requires, it can take away the land, right? And only in public utility. And that is why in India we have had the Land Acquisition Act of 1894, right? That is the Colonial Act. And also South Africa has the Expropriation Act, right? So this is why we have to understand this is the eminent domain doctrine that we are talking about, that if at all for public purpose the land is taken, but we have to keep in mind the public purpose and also the compensation. Now when we talk about the other aspects of this article, this is talking about the various provisions of right to property, or say right to private property in US and South Africa and also India, that we have discussed already. We have to look into the US here, that in the US, according to their 5th Amendment, in 1791, right? So they stated that no person shall be deprived of their property without the due process of law, and no private property shall be taken for public use without just compensation, right? Also South Africa, in its constitution, it says that no one shall be deprived of the property except in terms of law of general application, and no law shall permit arbitrary deprivation of property. That is, in this particular aspect, the main thing that we are focusing on. While the country has eminent domain, that is, it has a right to acquire land, but it should be for public purposes and adequate compensation must be given. So that is why, in US and India, we have land acquisition laws. That is, according to Article 300, what we saw, that no person shall be deprived of his property except by the authority of the law. So there must be a law. So the law is the Right to Acquisition Act here. So here in the US, land acquisition has actually moved towards encouraging private investment to stimulate economic growth. And that is why in Kellow versus City of New London 2005 case in the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court ruled that efforts to acquire property to facilitate private economic development would fulfill the public use requirement, right? So it is focusing on better amount of private, involvement and more, power of the private sector here. That is why in response, various of their states, such as Alabama, Delaware, Texas, has passed laws restricting the use of eminent domain to acquire private property. So that is, it is making now more difficult for the government to acquire land for public purposes, right? Because Supreme Court has focused more on the private sector, and private sector will be better using the land for its own economic benefit. In India, we have to understand several laws detail land acquisition provisions, right, for the construction of highways, atomic energy, preservation of national monuments, and so on, right? And also we had the colonial law here, but in 2013, the more serious law, that is the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency and Land Acquisition Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act came to establish human participative, informative, transparent progress, where for rural areas, for urban areas, we have a certain kind of land value and also the correct amount of value that must be accruing to the landowners. In the comment section, can you let me know what is the margin of, say, the value or say the margin that is dedicated under rural and urban areas for this LAR Act, which was also discussed just recently in the previous analyst sessions too. Besides this, a very important aspect of this law is to conduct social impact assessment to determine not only the economic cost of the land acquisition, but also the cost of displacement and the various social related costs here. Now, when we talk about this eminent domain and right to acquire private property by the state, we cannot ignore the Kolkata Municipal Corporation versus Bimal Kumar Shah 2024 case that happened recently, right? So the main key observation the Supreme Court upheld that while the country has the power of eminent domain, that yes, the public for public purposes, the government can actually acquire land. But here we have to understand, Supreme Court also told that the right to property is protected as a constitutional right. That is a constitutional and legal right and has even been interpreted to be a human right. So right to property, apart from a constitutional right, the Supreme Court told, right now it is even a human right. So that is why we have to understand the interpretation of authority of law in Article 300. Right? That is that there must be an authority of law, and that is why we have to set up a national institution. Maybe we can also give constitutional power when it concerns about the land related issues and the disputes. Even here the state governments at their end can also do the same. And here that is why the Supreme Court gave 7 important steps. You can read all the steps, you can read all of the important aspects here, the 7 aspects when it concerns the land acquisition, as to how the public or the government must be following certain standards for compensation and so for the acquisition of land here. So this will be given in a handout. Please do pursue it. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. Now recently our Prime Minister is on a visit to Europe and later to the US. That is why he is on a mission to attract private sector investments in the country, and one of this investment that India is trying to improve over a period of time is in the nuclear sector. In India we have strict laws pertaining to the development and also the nuclear power plants and also the nuclear supplies in the country because of the disasters that we have seen, in the past decades, be the Chernobyl disaster, which was directly a nuclear related disaster, right? Also, we have seen the Bhopal gas tragedy, which is not a nuclear disaster, but it is a disaster of massive scale. So that is where we have to understand there must be a particular amount of law, or say liability clause in the country, in India and also elsewhere, to govern regarding nuclear and its suppliers and the nuclear plants. So on a global scale, we have the OECD and the IAEA conventions, right? On the OECD part, we have the Paris Convention, Brussels Supplementary Convention, right? And also the protocols revising the past two conventions. When we talk about the IAEA conventions, we have the Vienna Convention, the revised convention of the same, and the most important, which India is also signatory to, that is 1997 Convention of Supplementary Convention. So both of them were later, implemented as a joint protocol, right? But we have to understand, it is India's Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act of 2010, which is closely following the Convention on Supplementary Compensation, that is 1997 compensation, which is telling that the country must be having a minimum national compensation amount, if at all, may God forbid that, but if at all there is a nuclear disaster in the country. So on whom the responsibility should be going on with reference to various costs and damages to human lives and environment and the spillover effects. So the act here, the 2010 act here, became very strict, and it imposed conditions on the nuclear plant. It held the nuclear plant liable for anything regardless of any fault, and also here indirectly the nuclear suppliers were brought in. Now distinction must be made between the nuclear plant and the suppliers. Nuclear plant operators are those people who are operating the nuclear plants, the generating energies and so on. Nuclear suppliers are those people who are distributing raw materials such as uranium, such as the various rods that are used in reactors. So if there are any defects in this, that can also indirectly lead to various disasters here. So that is why the government set up the private liability at 1,500 crores. Plus also, if at all a disaster is happening, the amount would be minimum of 1,500 crores. Apart from this, the companies, or say the nuclear power plants, the suppliers, they must be having insurance or say other various financial security measures annually over a period of time. So the compliance, the norms and rules were increased in this particular act. The government liability also was brought in, that if at all this particular compensation is falling short of the total damage, right, the government must be contributing additional 300 million of say SDRs, right? So SDRs, here in the comments you let me know who is releasing it, who is proposing it, and also what it is composed of, the major currencies here. So in rupee terms, this amount is amounting to around 2,100 to 2,300 crores of rupees. That is additionally of private and public kind of responsibility. Private sector must be having a compensation of 1,500, that is government can contribute additional of up to 2,300 crores. Mainly the issues with this particular act is that the stringent supplier liability clauses. So apart from the plant one, we also have the suppliers in this particular act, which major countries such as France, Russia, US, all of these nuclear private companies, they are complaining against India that this is making ease of doing business in India very less in the nuclear sector. And also, due to this, India created a 1,500 crore insurance pool, of which the government of India would try to promote it, but still this was not adopted as a popular mechanism. And also, when we talk about this particular convention, this is aligning convention or say responsibility or liability only to the plant operators, not suppliers. So this is also that particular thing, that if at all you have implemented a national convention in the country via this particular 2010 Act, so you must be following the international convention too. So that is what we have to understand here, that recently the Prime Minister is having a visit to Paris and later Washington. So that is why the government is sending signals that we will be amending the Atomic Act and also the 2010 Nuclear Liability Law, where this will be trying to boost the American and French nuclear power companies and their operation in the country, because already we have some nuclear projects going on in Jagpur in Maharashtra, in also Kovada in Andhra Pradesh. So and additional, the government is also trying to promote, as we have seen, 20,000 rupees 20,000 crore rupees of small modular reactors in the country. So that is why we need better amount of ecosystem of nuclear supply chain. We already have the civil nuclear deal, right? That was brokered between US and India in 2008, and also various other countries such as France and Japan followed on. So these things are not enough. We need to streamline the ecosystem in the country of nuclear, energy. That is why the main objective of aim of relaxing these provisions as of now, will be seeing as to if they're relaxing later or not. But as of now, if our Prime Minister is going to the countries and trying to amend some laws before that, it is sending a good signal to increase the nuclear investments in our country. And also, it will be accelerating nuclear power capacity expansion from around 6,700 megawatts recently to 100 gigawatts by 2047, because again, we have to remember our Panchamrit target of achieving net zero by 2070. And here, nuclear energy is actually that kind of energy which requires, obviously huge investments initially, but over a period of time, the amount of energy it is generating for the country, it is actually quite sufficient to fulfill that particular target. This will be also facilitating new nuclear projects and will be reviving the old and delayed ones. It will be also increasing the domestic adoption of advanced nuclear technology, because part of this particular developments are also geared to Indian startups and existing Indian companies, even the SMEs, or the small and medium companies or enterprises here. And finally, it will be trying to enhance India-US and India-France strategic ties. So in your notes of India-US and India-France, please do try to note down this development as one of the major positive event that has taken place in recent times. Now we'll be moving on to the next one. Now recently the NTCA has expressed its concerns regarding a proposed dam project in Madhya Pradesh. In prelims perspective, when it concerns general issues on environmental ecology and also from GST perspective of conservation, we need to look into what firstly the NTCA is all about, and then we'll be looking into the mapping aspects of the later thing here. So when we talk about the NTCA, it is a statutory authority under the WPA Act, and it was included in 2006 as a statutory institution, mainly to promote the implementation of Project Tiger in the country. Now it is under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. The members here is consisting of a chairperson who is the ministry, who is actually the Minister of Environment. Apart from the Minister of State of this particular ministry, apart from this, we also have 3 members of Parliament, Secretary to the Ministry of Environment, and also various other members. The main powers and functions that they are having, firstly, is to have a statutory authority for implementing Project Tiger, which started in the country from 1973 onwards, and right now there are more than 50 plus tiger reserves in the country. In the comment section, you let me know what is the latest tiger reserve which has been denoted officially as of now. Apart from this, it is also trying to approve the various tiger plans by the various state governments and trying to implement it, suggesting various recommendations too. It is also giving guidelines for various tourism activity to promote and regulate the same in tiger reserves, and also the critical tiger habitat, which is the core amount of tiger habitat within a particular tiger reserve, right? So within the tiger reserves, we have a core area such as this one, which we know as critical tiger habitat, and the surrounding regions which are known as buffer zones. So NTCA is having the word, or the various guidelines on regulating these zones. It is also addressing the various man-animal conflict in this regard, and also the tiger estimation which is done regularly. As of now, we have around 3,682 tigers. It is to be reminded, in 2006 we had around 1,411 tigers. Over a period of time, with Corbett, with Bandipur, with Nagarhole and various other tiger reserves and their increases, the tiger population is increasing over a period of time. Apart from this, the various SOPs adopted by the NTCA to address the human-tiger interface issues is that, right, we must be developing a national repository of camera-trapped tiger photographs with proper IDs. These are extremely important information for your prelims and even mains. We need to have active management for rescuing tigers from human dominated landscape to prevent the instances of various tigers being hit by human beings to death. Also, we must be conducting assessment, national assessment with reference to tigers, their prey, their co-predators, right, for a proper understanding. Also, independent management effectiveness evaluation must be done, declaring new and consolidating already existing tiger reserves, and obviously increasing the research and development. When we concern about this new development, the NTCA has actually expressed concern over a new project which is trying to various irrigation projects on the rivers of Morand and Ganjal in Madhya Pradesh. As you can see, this is near the Betul town of MP, right, which is also within the very sensitive and heavily dense of forested areas of Satpura Tiger Reserve and the Melghat Tiger Reserves. So this area is actually a heavily forested area and is also a very important tiger corridor, right? Frequently many tigers from here will be going to this one, this tiger reserve, and this to this one. That is why building any construction or say irrigation project, right, is kind of detrimental to the conservation of tigers in this region. That is why we have to understand this can submerge forested areas used by tigers that they actually use to move between the various reserves, right? Also, the FAC under the Ministry of Environment, right, is actually proposing say deforestation worth of around 2,000 hectares of forest land here. Right, this will be displacing around 600 families, more than 600 tribal families here. 7 lakh trees will be affected, with 5.75 lakh trees deforested, and also home to this particular region is home to leopards, wild dogs, hyenas, and various herbivores, where they will also be affected. Now, a little fact about FAC, the Forest Advisory Committee, it is under the Forest Conservation Act 1980, it is to be noted, right? And it is evaluating the various industrial projects, the irrigation projects, and various projects to be taken in the forested areas where they can approve or may not approve the, say, project here. So that is why we have to keep in track of such things here, because according to National Tiger Estimation 2022 report, right, we have to understand these dams and these structures are inherently building, say, various barriers between tigers and their population across reserves, and this is not good for their conservation. So it is to be seen what the government will be doing, say, next. But for our revision, we can solve this PYQ, and you let me know in the comments what the answer is. Now, in this one, we will be looking into the Union Budget 2025-26 and its components of allocations into the urban development schemes. This is very important for our economic and social development. In GS2, we need to know about the various welfare schemes, and also in GS2, we have to also be aware of the local institutions and the local bodies and the various issues that they face with reference to their funds, functions, and even functionalities. So in this one, in this particular report, in this particular article, it is talking that the total outlay for urban development stands at around 97,000 crores, which is actually higher than earlier year's budget. But here the article also tells that we have inflation in between. So according to inflation, or say if we factor in the inflation, the actual amount will be kind of lower. Right? And also when we talk about, say, the revised estimates, it suggests that only 63,000 crore, right, will be spent by March. That is leading to an underutilization rate of 23% around. Because we have to understand here the main or key issues here. Firstly, when we talk about, say, the various trends of, say, the funds which are denoted to the local bodies for urban development, those funds are kind of, decreasing over a period of time. Because let us analyze two very basics first. There are 3 channels of transfers from the government of India to the urban India. That is the urban local bodies. Firstly, there are direct transfers to the urban local bodies. These are, as a source of, for example, say, direct tax revenues and so on. For example, say, octroi, or the various taxation powers that they are usually, bestowed upon with. But mainly the state governments do not devolve those taxation powers to the local bodies. Or even the implementation of GST has actually made the revenues of the urban local bodies fall by over 21%. So as we can understand, octroi, which was a key revenue source, and also the implementation of GST, it has dealt twin blow to the revenues or say transfers to the urban local bodies here, right? And here when we also talk about say the shortfall here, right, instead of increasing support, right, it has actually declined to around 26,158 crore rupees. So this shortfall will be forcing the cities to raise their own revenues and burdening the citizens with excess tax revenues. Also, when we talk about the central sponsored scheme, such as the schemes as we can see here, Jal Jeevan Mission, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Gramin, an urban component, Gram Sadak Yojana, Amrut, smart cities, right? We have seen, as you can see in this particular figure also, the allocation for these particular schemes have reduced. Or say they have kind of stayed even stagnant over the last year, where we need to focus more on urban development because India is rapidly urbanizing. So that is what is another aspect here. And here the centrally sponsored scheme has another issue, that a percentage also has to be spent by the state government too. So state government do not have the funds on themselves. So that is what it is leading to another issue. Next, when we talk about the central sector scheme, which is the component which is 100% funded by the central government, right? This is the section where the government is focusing more on, because here the government is directly focusing on capital intensive projects such as metro development. But government must be realizing that apart from capital intensive infrastructural projects, the various peoples, they need these kind of things too. For example, affordable housing, drinking water, and more say toilets in the say urban areas. So this is also something that the Indian cities need. So apart from this, the government must have also increased funding on those sectors. This article is arguing for. And here what is next is that the urban challenge fund of 10,000 crores has been listed here, where this is having an ambitious target of 1 lakh crore to implement urban redevelopment program, where this fund will be implementing proposals for cities as growth hub, where this will be financing up to 25% of the cost of bankable projects, cost of say water, sanitation, and various redevelopments such as street lighting and so on. So at least here 50% of the cost to be funded through bonds, bank loans, and PPP. So here again you see the government of India is not funding them. It is actually transferring the responsibility to the various banks, private sector, state governments, and municipal corporations too. So here, while government has given 10,000 crores, the rest of the funds must be mobilized accordingly. And here, that is why the emphasis too much on capital intensive product must not be say the ultimate way forward, where we need to have better amount of sustainable economic policies for urban India too. Finally, in the last article, we'll be discussing about the status of foreign universities in the country, because Surrey University becomes the 7th university to set a branch in India, in India's gift city Gujarat, right? So here, firstly, we have to understand what is the need of setting foreign universities in the country. We have money drain that is around $80 billion, which flows to the rest of the world, and that is by 2024. The present data is even more, right? Also, when we talk about the brain drain, right, from 2016 to 2019, we have around 4.4 lakh people to increase to 7.7 lakh who actually went out of India for various high school education. Also, this is trying to improve the gross enrollment ratio in higher education, because we have the various private universities and government universities where there are not enough seats sometimes, and also there are affordability concerns. Also, we are trying to bring in cultural exchanges of other nations, bring in more competition in our local universities, and also spill over the knowledge of international faculties in our present universities, and also trying to aid the national education policy. When we talk about the key provisions of UGC, right, and the IFSCA, right, where they have their own regulations. Firstly, we have to understand not all universities can set up campus in India. Only top 500, according to various world rankings of universities, they can set up, where joint application permitted, and also award of degree, diploma, certification, completion of courses mandated by these foreign universities. So they are at par with national universities here. Also, when we talk about their profits, they can easily take back the profit, and also they have the flexibility to recruit their own staff, faculty from India or abroad. When it comes to the various programs and courses, there are only specific courses to be permitted in GIFT City, distance course learning to be not been allowed, and also these are equivalent to the qualifications in India too. And also when we talk about the freedom of determining fees and the various aspects here, the freedom is given to the universities here to determine their own fees, scholarships may be given, and student exchange, teacher exchange also are allowed here. So here in this aspect here, apart from Deakin University, Wollongong, Western Sydney, Southampton, Coventry, Queen's University, Belfast, and Surrey, they have all expressed interest with Deakin and Wollongong and various other prospects. They are trying to set up campus in the country, right? Surrey is the 4th university from the UK to show their interest, and they will be setting up at Gujarat's GIFT City, which is a very attractive destination for education, energy, buildings, infrastructure, healthcare, transportation, governance, and technology in the country, right? So this is what we have to understand. GIFT City is also allowing universities 100% ownership of their Indian branch campuses and also repatriation of their profits to their parent universities, right? They can offer courses in finance management, science, technology, engineering, and management, and they are also free from domestic regulations except the regulations proposed by IFSCA for actually adhering to the education standards in the country. So with this, I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up, and till we meet again, thank you, all the best, and best of luck.